Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco. I'm currently unemployed, so I created this channel to earn some extra income. I'll be updating you with the latest news about the Drama General Hospital.
We just received some shocking news from Danny, and the story is that Danny is making a shocking decision, and this is causing real panic in Port Charles. What makes Danny so dangerous now is not simply rebellion, it is purpose. He is beginning to look at the world through a lens Jason once understood too well. A lens where power is not requested but taken, where rights are not protected by law but defended by force, and where the only way to hold on to the people you love is to become more frightening than the people trying to take them away. That shift changes everything. Danny is no longer just a boy wounded by abandonment, confusion, and the aching silence Jason left behind. He is becoming someone who believes that weakness invites loss, that hesitation gets people destroyed, and that violence is not a last resort but the clearest language in a broken city. That belief is the real crisis. It is what turns grief into ambition and pain into identity. Danny does not simply miss his father. He is starting to worship the shadow Jason left behind, and in that shadow he sees not tragedy but authority, not ruin but control. The deeper emotional wound lies in the fact that Danny believes Jason's absence created a vacuum that no one else can fill. Sunny can offer warnings, Alexis can offer fear, Carly can offer protection, but none of them can replace the brutal certainty Danny associates with Jason. In Danny's mind, Jason did not survive by being gentle, patient, or obedient. Jason survived because he was willing to become what others were too afraid to be. Now that Jason is gone, Danny is beginning to imagine that someone has to protect Jason's territory, Jason's name, and Jason's unfinished business. The tragedy is that he does not yet understand the difference between inheriting a legacy and being devoured by it. He thinks he is stepping up. In reality, he is stepping into a fire that has already burned through one generation of his family. That is why the idea of rights matters so much in Danny's emotional unraveling. He has started to interpret Jason's absence as a theft. Something has been taken from his father, from his bloodline, from the identity he believes belongs to him by birth. In his mind, the world does not merely owe Jason respect, it owes Jason restoration. Danny is no longer thinking like a child waiting for adults to fix things. He is thinking like an heir to a damaged empire, someone who sees every insult as a debt and every delay as humiliation. The more he sits with that belief, the more he convinces himself that reclaiming Jason's place cannot happen through patience, legality, or trust. It can only happen through force. That is the moment where a hurt boy begins to become something harder, colder, and far more terrifying. Alexis feels that danger before she can even fully name it. For her, Danny's descent is not just another teenage crisis. It is history returning in a crueler form. She knows too well what Jason's life cost the people around him. She knows the emotional wreckage left behind by choices made in the name of loyalty and protection. She knows that once violence becomes part of a person's moral logic, every future decision gets twisted by it. So when she begins to understand that Danny is not merely fascinated by Jason's world, but actively drawn toward it, her horror is immediate and visceral. It is not abstract fear. It is the sick realization that the next generation may be repeating the worst parts of the last one, only faster and with even less restraint. Danny is not carrying Jason's discipline, experience, or emotional control. He is carrying Jason's myth, stripped of wisdom and sharpened by adolescent rage. Carly is shaken for a different reason. Alexis fears what Danny could become, but Carly understands how seductive that transformation can feel. She has spent years close enough to Jason to know why people followed him, feared him, and depended on him. She understands the illusion of safety that power creates. She also understands the way loyalty can turn into an excuse for cruelty when grief enters the room. So watching Danny drift toward that same darkness forces her to confront a terrible possibility. Jason's legend may have survived too well. What was once admired as strength in Jason now threatens to become corruption in his son. Carly can see that Danny is not reaching for random chaos. He is reaching for structure, purpose, and the intoxicating fantasy of becoming untouchable. That is what makes him so difficult to stop. He is not spiraling because he believes in nothing. He is spiraling because he believes in something too much. The most explosive turn in this story comes from Danny's conviction that he can save Jason. That belief gives his descent a mission, and mission is always more dangerous than anger alone. A reckless boy can still be restrained. A boy who thinks he is on a rescue path becomes much harder to reach. If Danny starts to believe that Jason's return to Port Charles depends on him proving himself worthy, or on him making contact with the right people, or on him stepping into criminal spaces Jason once controlled, then every warning from Alexis and Carly only pushes him further towards secrecy. He will no longer see their fear as love. He will see it as interference. He will begin hiding calls, hiding meetings, hiding names. He will convince himself that grown-ups failed Jason and that he alone is willing to do what must be done. That kind of thinking does not just create rebellion, it creates obsession. Jakarta, in that sense, becomes more than a location. It becomes a symbol of distance, exile, and dark initiation. If Danny convinces himself that the road to Jason runs through Jakarta, then he is no longer imagining a simple reunion. He is imagining a test. He is imagining that the only way to bring Jason home is to cross a line no one expects him to cross. The city becomes a fever dream in his mind, a place where truth can be recovered, alliances can be forged, and the boy everyone still underestimates can prove he is not a child anymore. That fantasy is intoxicating precisely because it allows Danny to rewrite his pain as destiny. Instead of being abandoned, he becomes chosen. Instead of being powerless, he becomes essential. Instead of waiting for Jason to return, he becomes the one who will drag Jason back by force of will. But fantasies built on violence never stay clean for long. The closer Danny gets to that vision, the more likely he is to lose the part of himself that wanted Jason back out of love, rather than pride. And beneath that ambition lies a far darker emotional truth. Danny may say he wants to save Jason, but part of him also wants to become Jason before Jason returns. He wants to stand in the empty space Jason left and prove that the bloodline did not weaken, that the Morgan name still commands fear, that he can carry what older generations could not. This is where the story becomes tragic rather than merely dramatic. Because Danny is not chasing crime for pleasure alone. He is chasing a version of manhood shaped by loss, silence, and myth. He thinks becoming dangerous will protect him from heartbreak. He thinks if he becomes hard enough, no one will ever leave him helpless again. But every step in that direction pushes him further away from the very people who still want to save him. Charlotte's presence only intensifies the danger because she reflects back the thrill Danny is already craving. Around someone else who resists authority, who treats rules as games to outsmart rather than boundaries to respect, Danny's impulses no longer feel extreme, they feel understood. Together, that kind of reckless energy can turn fantasy into action much faster than Alexis or Carly can react. What begins as defiance can become planning. What begins as curiosity can become contact with people who see value in a teenager carrying the Morgan name. And once the wrong people realize Danny is emotional enough to manipulate and bold enough to move, he stops being merely a troubled kid. He becomes an asset. That is when the real darkness begins. Because organized crime does not just recruit strength. It recruits vulnerability wrapped in pride. If Danny reaches that point, Alexis and Carly will not simply be shocked, they will be forced into a moral panic that tears open everything unresolved between them, Jason, and the history they all tried to survive. Alexis will see every old fear reborn in Sam's son. Carly will see Jason's legacy mutating into something even more unstable. Both women will understand that this is no longer about curfews, bad influences, or adolescent rage. This is about whether a boy in pain can be pulled back before he decides that fear is power and violence is love. Their terror will come not only from what Danny is doing, but from the possibility that somewhere deep inside him, the decision has already been made. That is what gives this storyline such a powerful, emotional charge. Danny is not falling because he is evil. He is falling because he is wounded, and because the mythology surrounding Jason offers him a seductive answer to every wound he carries. It promises control where he feels chaos, purpose where he feels emptiness, and strength where he feels humiliation. But the road he is choosing is not a path back to Jason. It is a path into the same machinery that consumed Jason's life piece by piece. If Danny goes to Jakarta, if he reaches for criminal power, if he starts believing he alone can restore what was taken, then the story stops being about a teenager acting out and becomes something much more chilling. It becomes the birth of a new mafia heir, one driven not by cold strategy, but by unresolved grief, inherited rage, and the desperate need to prove that he was never the boy left behind.
I'll be back at the General Hospital soon. We'll see each other again soon. Thank you for supporting my channel. Goodbye and see you again.